Imagine this, it's 1998, you're at an Italian dealership, and among all the elegant cars, this appears, a vehicle that looks half frog, half spaceship, with headlights that seem to be judging you. That's how the Fiat Multipla was born, the car that divided the world between those who loved it and those who wanted to set it on fire. But today I will not only tell you why people hated it, but how this monster became a legend. Let's start with the obvious, its design. It was the year 1998 when Fiat decided to present the world with a completely revolutionary proposal. It was a time when almost all car manufacturers were seeking sleek, elegant, and aerodynamic designs, with shapes that seemed to have come from an artist's brush. And in the midst of all that, Fiat appeared with the Multipla, doing something completely opposite. While other brands were concerned with beauty, Fiat decided to focus exclusively on functionality, almost completely sacrificing any sense of aesthetics. The result was a car that, when presented at the Paris Motor Show, left the attendees speechless, but not exactly for the right reasons. When the cloth covering the vehicle was revealed, the looks of admiration quickly turned into puzzled faces. The front of the Multipla looked like a collage designed by several teams that never communicated with each other. But here's the curious part of the story. Although most people would never publicly admit they liked it, the Multipla had something hypnotic about it. There were those who, when passing by a Fiat dealership, would slow down just to gaze at that oddity. So, after this first look at the Multipla, you might be wondering, did this car really deserve so much hate, or was it simply ahead of its time? Have you ever heard the phrase that says, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Well, in the case of the Fiat Multipla, those eyes didn't find much beauty, at least not at first glance. But what if I tell you that maybe Fiat had such an advanced vision that it simply didn't fit in its time? To better understand this, we need to delve into the specific design details, discover what its creators were thinking, and above all, try to understand what went wrong. Let's start from the outside, with the most controversial point. Controversial and striking about this vehicle, its front. The front part of the Multipla is probably the most controversial and hardest to digest aspect of the car. To illustrate it better, imagine for a moment the head of an amphibian animal, with large, separated eyes, a wide face, an inflated appearance, and that strange feeling that something doesn't quite fit in the proportions. That's exactly how the Multipla looked. The main headlights were at the bottom, but Fiat decided that adding two small round lights higher up was an excellent idea. The problem was that those additional lights looked like bulging eyes, surprised at the world watching them. On the other hand, the roofline was equally unusual. Instead of following a sleek and fluid style, Fiat opted for a high, square, and abrupt structure that resembled a small bus more than a family vehicle. This decision was based on a very specific practical logic: to offer extraordinary interior space, with unmatched capacity for passengers and luggage. But, once again, Fiat underestimated something crucial. Buyers not only seek utility, they also want pride and admiration behind the wheel. No one wants to own the car that makes the neighbors laugh. When automotive experts first saw the Multipla, their reaction was brutal. Completely honest. A famous review by a British journalist claimed that it looked like it was designed by two different teams who never met, one in the morning and another in the afternoon, without ever communicating with each other. It was the best way to describe a vehicle whose upper lines did not match at all with the lower ones. What was Fiat really trying to achieve with this risky gamble? To understand it better, we need to go back a bit and see the context in which the Multipla emerged. In the late 90s, European families began to demand larger, more practical, and versatile cars. Brands were competing to deliver innovative family solutions, and Fiat decided to break all the established rules to grab attention and become the leader of the segment. In theory, it seemed like a brilliant strategy to do something so radical that it would be impossible to ignore. And yes, they indeed managed to capture attention for Fiat, adapt the attention. What they never imagined was that this attention would be almost exclusively negative. The design of the Multipla not only generated rejection but also created memes before social media even existed. Can you imagine that? People joked saying things like the Multipla was a car only a mother could love, or even humorously asked, what was the name of the Fiat designer and why does he hate us so much? The funny thing is that the vehicle wasn't technically bad. In fact, many specialists agreed that it had surprising performance and an extraordinary use of space. It forgot something that Apple learned very well years later, that an elegant and attractive design can be just as important as the internal functionality of a product. After all, a car is not just a transportation tool, it is also an extension of personal style, ego, and good taste. They say that what matters is on the inside, and perhaps that's exactly what the Fiat engineers thought when they designed the Multipla. But, after having seen what its exterior was like, you're surely wondering, could its interior be as peculiar as its external appearance? The first thing that would surprise you is that instead of having the classic distribution of 5 seats, 2 in the front and 3 in the back, Fiat decided to place 3 seats in the front and another 3 in the back, creating a capacity for 6 adults to sit comfortably. Yes, You read that right, 3 people sitting in the front. This detail, although it seems simple on paper, was absolutely revolutionary in practice and turned the Multipla into a kind of rare phenomenon in the automotive world. Suddenly, traveling with family had a new dimension. It was literally like sitting shoulder to shoulder with 2 other people in the front, like the first row in a movie theater, but in a car. Now, if you think about it from a functional point of view, this arrangement made sense. Fiat really wanted to offer extreme practicality. The logic was simple. Why leave an empty and unused space between the driver and the passenger if it could be used for another passenger? The problem arose when, for example, you tried to change the radio or use the gear shift if your hand bumped into the knee of the person sitting next to you. Or worse yet, when you tried to enjoy some privacy or personal space and it was almost impossible to achieve. It was like a flight in economy class, functional but slightly uncomfortable. Moreover, the dashboard of the Multipla was just as peculiar. Imagine a traditional dashboard, then forget it completely. Fiat chose to place the instrument panel on a raised central island, right in the middle of the car. It was so strange that many drivers said they felt like they were piloting a spaceship from a 60s futuristic movie. Everything, absolutely everything, from the speedometer to the radio and the ventilation controls were in that central location. Something that, although it might sound modern, ended up being a big mess. It was incredibly uncomfortable for the driver, who had to constantly turn their head to check any basic information. Despite these negative points, it must be admitted that Fiat achieved something really interesting in terms of interior spaciousness. Unlike other family vehicles, the Multipla offered exceptional comfort in terms of legroom and headroom, especially for tall passengers or large families. It wasn't uncommon to hear comments from users who, after overcoming the initial shock, would say with a shy smile, "It's ugly, yes, but all 6 of us fit perfectly. It's like a minivan disguised as a small car." This brings us precisely to one of the most interesting points about the interior of the Multipla. Although it wasn't a beautiful or especially comfortable vehicle from a traditional standpoint, it was incredibly practical and flexible. Its seats were foldable, removable, and adjustable, allowing for different configurations according to the user's needs. That's why, although it visually caused confusion, on a practical level it pleasantly surprised those who dared to try it. So what went wrong? Why, if it had so many practical advantages, did people still outright reject it? They say there's only a step from hate to love, but in the case of the Fiat Multipla, it seems that step was too big for most people. However, what if I told you that amid all the mockery, rejection, and ruthless criticism, there were those who genuinely defended this peculiar car? First, let's lay all the cards on the table. Yes, there was a lot of hate towards this car. In fact, saying that people hated the Multipla would be an understatement. As soon as the vehicle hit the streets, it became the subject of jokes, constant mockery, and even debates among car enthusiasts. Social media didn't yet dominate everyday life, but the Multipla went viral long before memes formally existed. People compared it to strange animals, with deformed everyday objects and all kinds of unattractive creatures. In the United Kingdom, for example, the automotive press dubbed the Multipla as the car you wouldn't want to be seen driving, a verdict that spread like wildfire across Europe and later around the world. But behind this apparent rejection, something curious happened. Many users who had purchased the vehicle began to discover surprising qualities in it. This is when the surprises begin. It turns out that as people used the Multipla for longer, something unexpected happened. They began to grow fond of it. Yes, seriously, maybe it wasn't love, nor something they would announce, but slowly they began to defend it against constant attacks. In specialized forums, there was no shortage of stories from proud owners who confessed something revealing. I know it's a bit of the story of proud owners, but it's not as simple as it seems. It's ugly, I admit it, but I've never had a more practical and spacious car than this one. There were even online communities that emerged to defend the Multipla. Some fans claimed, half jokingly and half seriously, that this car was like a peculiar pet. It's ugly, but it's our ugly. It's like when your friend proudly shows you their unattractive dog and says lovingly, but it's so friendly and affectionate. That was exactly the feeling many owners developed towards the vehicle. A strange, amusing affection, based more on empathy than on aesthetic admiration. However, even though it had defenders, Fiat also made mistakes that intensified the criticism. Their initial advertising tried to downplay its unconventional appearance with unconvincing messages like different on the outside, spacious on the inside, which only increased the jokes. By trying to hide something as evident as the controversial design, Fiat only heightened the negative perception of the car, reinforcing the idea that even they weren't convinced of what they had created. Over time, public opinion clearly divided drivers into 2 opposing groups: those who saw the Multipla as a total disaster, and those who secretly enjoyed it precisely for being different and groundbreaking. The latter formed a small group of proud owners, who today even boast about owning a historical rarity. Some examples of the Multipla have become collector's cars precisely because of the use of cars from that era. Due to its visual strangeness, something unthinkable 2 decades ago. So what exactly made this car receive so much public rejection, yet generate so much private attachment? The answer is simple. The Multipla was too daring for its time. Fiat was light years ahead in practical needs, but completely forgot that cars are much more than functional objects. They are also a reflection of our identity and personality. No one wants to drive something that provokes constant ridicule. Ultimately, the Multipla was a victim of its own audacity, misunderstood by the majority, by a silent minority. Now that you know how people really experienced it, it's time to ask, was the Multipla an absolute failure, or did it actually leave an indelible mark that deserves some recognition?